I hope everybody is still with me and excited for the session as I am. This is the first time I'm speaking, giving a talk in Americas, not a physical one, digital one, but that's still okay. And I hope everybody is doing okay. Their families are fine in this tough time, and we are going to get through this. And I'm here to actually share my little bit of experience that I got with working with AMP. So now we don't have that much of time. I'll try to keep my introductions and things short. So I'm Aman Sharma. I am founder and CTO at Twimbit, which is a research company. Also, I'm a lead at mobile-web.dev, which is a community for open source mobile web technology. And I'm a member at AMP, an open source initiative. I This is not the first talk I've been giving. I work along with AMP, WordPress, machine learning, cloud, and I just keep on like helping community. And this talk is about firstly what makes a first best impression. And in this case, we are not talking about the best impression that you have on a date or in a bar or just wherever you want to go, but about the websites. The best first impression in front of your customers who are visiting the sites for the first time. And we'll be covering what is AMP and how does it makes web faster. That is, how does it makes the first impression look great. And also how you can get started with AMP. We'll have a small DIY hello world example of AMP, and this will help you get a little bit of head around. If you are a developer in AMP already, that will get your basics clear again, or otherwise if you are a new one, you just need to know HTML, and I'll get you through of what will make you a great developer in AMP. Plus, we'll go through a little bit of tools, what AMP offers that will help you make the journey a little easier. So, this is a little story that just occurred to me at the last moments, and this is the correct way of explaining what this presentation is all about. Let's imagine that you are this visitor sitting in the bar, and I don't know what scene of this movie is actually, but the story narrative goes something like this. There is a visitor who is visiting the website. They are trying to find your website on Google, and your website is loaded with chunk of HTML, CSS, GSS, and CSS, of course. I repeated it twice. The crux is that you have so much of good stuff, right? But you are shy of approaching the girl, and like you are not able to just go through that. And suddenly another person, a great looking guy, not that great as you, but of course a little decent, but he makes the first move and takes away the trophy. That's what actually AMP is going to help you with. It's going to make the first impression that is going to last forever in front of your audiences, and then rest your website, whatever you want to add in the features and everything, are going to work great. But what actually, in technical terms, in terms of web, what makes the best first impression? Basically, these are certain guidelines that were recently brought upon by Google, which kind of encloses core web vitals to be a primary factors in terms of recognizing if a website will be listed in the top web results or not. It was found it is not only important if your website only has good content, it should also perform very well, and also the overall experience, the page experience for the person should be great. In this, previously AMP sites were really ranked high, and you would have noticed that some of the publisher, news publisher, and some sites have a small bold icon next to the website link. That is how you can recognize if a website is AMP or not. These are pages which are cached directly on Google server. We'll see that in a minute. But what actually now Google has updated its policy, and it says that any website who follows the core web vitals criteria can be eligible to become part of the top tier stories. But AMP has still a significant portion of these top stories, and it can really get the job done very easily and very smoothly. And this is what the whole talk is about. The core web vitals cover three main principles, that is LCP, that stands for largest contentful paint, FID, first input delay, and CLS, cumulative layout shift. We'll talk about these in a minute. The first one, LCP, largest contentful paint, is a criteria which defines that how soon the biggest portion of the screen that has the biggest information or data loads when a person hits your website. It's not important sometimes that only the small element like the logo or the loader is loaded and that is recognized as the loaded page, but actually the content that actually helps the user make a decision whether he should stay on the website or not. Generally, website developers, when they create a website, they just only take care about the first load of the image, and they consider that to be a good thing about the website, but actually it's not. Your bloated JS or CSS, which is like kind of render blocking other elements, is the prime reason that most of the elements don't get rendered within time. Google recognizes 2.5 seconds to be a good score, and on an average, website don't score that well. So this is the first criteria that Google recognizes. The second one is first input delay. This is recognized as how much time it takes for a website to actually recognize the touch input that you are giving to a website. Let it be a button, let it be a sidebar, let it be some interactions like a playing of video with the touch gestures. Whatever time it takes for your responsiveness of the touch to be haptically activated on the screen of the user is the time for first input delay. It is recognized to be 100 milliseconds to be a good time for first input delay score. But again, websites are not very well clear with this criteria, and they don't perform very well on these criteria too. The last one is cumulative layout shift. This is actually how much space the new element that is going to occur in the website takes when the whole website is loaded. Generally, you would have seen in websites that you are going through a content and suddenly an ad pops up and you wanted to click on the other button, but actually the ad popped up later, and it took you to a second option which was not actually intended by you. So this is defined by cumulative layout shift. Guess what? These all core web vitals need to be at least 75% passed. That means the score of these web vitals need to be at least more than 75% for your results to be ranked on top of the Google search engine. So it's not only important that your SEO score is high, but also these core web vitals should be ranked first. So what actually happens when you don't have these core web vitals? It turns out that users are 24% likely to abandon your page if they don't find all these criteria to be valid. Now, you might think, okay, I want to create some website. It should be compelling. And you mean like you want to provide a great experience, but you also want it to keep fast. But usually, if you just create a website with normal HTML and just simple as CSS, it's not going to make a good impression in front of users. Is there a solution to it? Turns out it is. AMP is a combination of both of these approaches, which is having compelling websites with the same kind of performant features as a normal HTML. Now we'll go through how actually AMP is able to do that. So first of all, AMP is a web framework. Now there are possibly many web frameworks that you would have come across in the past. Let it be Jamstack, which is a recent discovery. But AMP is a little different. It is a bundle of best practices that are made to make sure that your website is always performant. It's always accessible and performs accessible across not only just certain browsers but all of them. And it should be reliable. That means even in low latency networks like where I am in India, still the internet connection is not that stable. The internet should run smoothly on these websites, and most of all, it should be responsive by design. You don't need to add media query or certain responsiveness feature after you develop the whole website, which is generally what developers do, even including me in the past. But if you use AMP, all these things, all these best practices are enforced by default. How AMP is able to actually do that is by three main things. The first one is AMP HTML, which is nothing but a new way of writing HTML markup. So you have your certain HTML elements like div or body, which just goes like that, and then you have certain AMP HTML elements which are responsible for the whole page performance, like IMG or YouTube video or just adding a normal video. We'll see about these components and all these HTML tags that AMP offers in a minute. Also, AMP JavaScript is a brand new way of running dynamic content. Just a hint that AMP doesn't allow you to add custom JavaScript. The reason for being that is it's found that most of the time, the main reason for website to load slow is the clunky, heavy lifting JavaScript that doesn't load at time and destroys the whole experience. Also, AMP cache is a wonderful thing that actually gives you ability of providing your content cached on Google servers right away as you create the AMP websites. Now, you would have been doing this already using CDN, and you know that it's not that hard, but doing it actually performant is little difficult. But the great news is if you create your website with AMP and if your website is 100% AMP valid, then they are automatically cached on Google server. The AMP cached Google server pages are automatically ranked top on the top stories. Now according to latest Google criteria, more websites, not just only AMP, will be able to rank on top, but AMP really makes the whole job little more easier. Also, It helps the user just load the page so instantly, like it was just right away in his Google search results. It also allows the person to safely browse and efficiently preload the pages without the need of having internet at the later stages. And of course, it gives a reliable performance across different search results. So it is something like your other websites are just struggling with loading the basic content, but your AMP pages are already loaded because they're cached on Google server. Now, this is something, this looks something like this, as you can see on your left. If you tap on any of the AMP stories, they just pop in like it is part of the Google search results, but actually it's your website which is cached on Google server. Now, there are different benefits that you get with AMP. You have a greater flexibility and control, which reduces the overall complexity of the code without needing to add any external CDN or any other service to make sure that your websites are performant. Also, it improves the overall experience and core business metrics because you have a higher score in core web vitals. That means less chances of people turning around, and that means more traffic and more users. Plus, all the elements that you add in AMP are like the building blocks for performance. Usually in websites, you would have noticed that the more HTML or the more JavaScript you add, the website becomes slow. But this is not the case with AMP. Every element is kind of vertically adding more performance to the whole page, and it doesn't matter if your website has like 10 sections or 100 sections, the page will load as smooth as possible. Also, building AMP pages is really easy. We'll go through a DIY to just see how easy it is to create websites with AMP. Plus, it's a sustainable future for an open source web where things are just going to be there forever, and AMP can be applied to various touch points. I recently gave a talk on AMP everywhere where I talked about how AMP is touching not just the web but also emails, web stories. If you have recently known about web stories, that is also part of AMP. Another other basic web components that were not performant before. This is just a simple statistics that you can see how businesses are getting benefit by using AMP. India Today, which is the India publishing house, got 6 times more traffic by implementing AMP websites. And also Washington Post, which is of course American news agency, got a 23% increase their returning users in mobile search results. And Gizmodo, which is a tech magazine, gives gained a 3x performance in their overall page load times. So you can also use AMP to improve your business metrics by a fold. Now, Chrome, this was a recent report that was generated by Chrome User Experience Report, and they found that 12% of non-AMP websites were likely to get a pass signature in Core Web Vital results. But it also found that 60% of them were having AMP. So that means if you are using AMP, there are 5 times more chances of you getting Core Web Vitals results in a pass condition, which is 75% score in all the Core Web Vitals criteria. So because AMP provides everything right away from built in from design. So now let's see how does it actually does that. So our first criteria that was largest contentful paint, which is the criteria which recognizes how much time it takes for the biggest element on your HTML to load. So AMP has a criteria that only 75 KB of CSS can be added. So and all of this CSS has to be inline only. The reason for this being is that if you don't have any external CSS that is more than 75 KB, that means there is no render blocking CSS or any layout shift that is occurring with the CSS. Also, JSS is normal JavaScript is not allowed. You are not allowed to use any third-party libraries, add your own custom JavaScript. There are other ways that loads the whole JavaScript in an async fashion and also minimizes that by design and helps you get the same results as a normal JavaScript. Also, it has features such as preloading and pre-rendering, which makes the whole job of a web browser to render your page a lot easier. The second criteria, that is first input delay, is also managed using less.js. That means less.js results in less time. The browser is able to render your request faster, and that means less first input delay. Also, all the JS that is added in AMP is totally async, which means that it doesn't create any render blocking of elements and everything loads smoothly. The images in AMP are lazy loading by default, and some other elements like videos are also having lazy loading, which means that it won't take any layout shift or any input delay when these things are happening. And also, all the processes are chunked. The last one, cumulative layout shift, is inherited in AMP by default. Every element that you add in AMP and has a layout structure needs to have a height and width by default. Your AMP page won't be valid without these criteria. So that means even if your component hasn't loaded yet, still the HTML won't shift its place and will remain like that. So now that we have seen what counts as a first good impression and how AMP actually helps you do that, let's get into an action and see how you can actually develop AMP websites. Now this is a basic HTML hello world example which is made with AMP. Let me take you through what are the basic components that are making this AMP HTML page rather than a normal HTML page. So if you see the declaration of the doc type of just below the doc type, the HTML AMP bolt emoji sign recognizes this page as AMP page. This tells the browser that it is not a normal page, and also the different crawling bots like Google Search Web Crawler also helps it to cache. Then the next thing is the head, where we have loaded some boilerplate code, some built-in async scripts like the amp.js that you can see over here. Also, we have added some little bit of amp boilerplate code and some canonical relations and viewport definitions and all that. This is where you add your custom Java, custom CSS that you want to add, or just inline inside the component. There is no scope of like adding third-party multiple CSS files that can later result in render blocking different CSS files. And at the end, you just write your HTML code like a normal way inside your body tag. Now CSS and AMP, it is like similarly these style component works almost the same as normal CSS, just with a little bit of restrictions. I forgot to correct it to 75 KB. The latest AMP criteria actually allows you to write 75 KB of CSS rather than 50 KB. Also, you are not able to use important tags because it has found that important and using multiple important at different levels creates a lot of render blocking issues and creates a bad performance. Also, if you want to include your CSS as mentioned before in the previous example, you can just add your CSS inside style amp custom in the head as inline, and this will help you get great performance. Some of the CSS settings like transitions are still not allowed, but amp is working continuously on making sure that these things comes along as soon as possible. This is a small example of how you can do a little bit of CSS to HTML components like body and paragraph and H2 over here, which looks like normal HTML. Only the declaration is like style and AMP custom. The next thing is AMP components. Now, as I told you in the beginning of this section, AMP HTML is a way of getting your components done inside AMP. And we have made a little bit of modification with these components. Like this image that we have added usually uses img tag, but in case of AMP, we have to use AMP img, which is a built-in component inside inside AMP. What this does is actually it intelligently supports lazy loading of images and also requires dimension so that this loads responsive by default. This is an example of what are the things that are required, which includes the dimension of the image that you want to load inside the website, the source of the website, source of the image, and the width and the height. This is a live example of how a AMP image component looks like inside the website. Also, there is a huge catalog of different components that you can just go on am.dev and find out. So I'll just change my screen and show you a live example of what this component looks like. So let's suppose you want to add a YouTube video to your website, and you can just go inside am.dev and search for YouTube, and it will show you a component that is suitably likely to add YouTube to your website. And it also gives you a small example of how you can add this component. And when you add this, you don't need to worry about performance or lazy loading this thing or having any first input delay. AMP handle everything by default. If you want to play with the code, you can also do that by in the same search. If you visit again, as you can see, you can open this in Playground, which is a nice way to test your AMP components without running the code inside your actual editor or inside your uh, like code editor, whatever it is, without need of any server local host that you want to add. Let's get back to our deck. So now let's look into some of the tools that can help you get things done inside AMP. The first one is AMP Validator. AMP Validator is a Chrome extension which is used to detect if a certain page is AMP valid or not. This tells you easily what are the issues with the website, also tells you a way to debug these things, and also get these all the errors that are occurring inside AMP fixed. If you have zero errors, that means your page is 100% AMP valid. That means it will get into the Core Web Vital results very easily. Let's go and see this live example of how a Chrome validator looks like. This is the website of my organization, and we suppose that we created this in AMP. Now, this Chrome extension automatically detects that this is AMP, but this is little invalid because line number 125 and 134 has some custom JavaScript. I can also click on the debug button, which will take me through validator and will take me through the actual code of the app. Now you can see this has been soon fixed, and this shows that validation is passed and there is no error at all. So this is how easy it is to get things done and get your error fixed inside. The second thing is AMP Playground, which I have already explained. Not just that, but you can visit AMP Playground to test out different other components in different other devices and see how they perform on different browsers. For example, you can go and check on how AMP GIFcat component might work. So it will give you a live example of things and also show you a nice preview of things, how things are looking in here. You can also edit the code right away. Another tool that is actually a npm package is called AMP Optimizer, which helps you create a AMP version of existing HTML product very easily. Make sure that you visit go.amp.dev/optimizer to find out more about this tool and check out how it actually helps your website become an AMP website. Last but not the least, we have AMP Pixie, which is AMP Page Experience. It is a tool that has been created by amp.dev to easily test the performance of the website and tell you how it is as compared to other websites, and also helps you improve the overall performance of the page. If you go to am.dev/page experience, here is a tool, and you can enter any website like https. Sorry, let's enter just am.dev to see how it is performing against core web vitals, and it will give you all the different core web vital results, and also if it is clearing the core web vitals. Make sure you check out all these links. I'll share the link to my deck so that you have all these notes afterwards. Also, there is a not a new thing, but a thing which was added by AMP a lot back, which is called bento amp. Bento amp is a new format by which you can create website without the criteria of having valid amp all the time. You can just use AMP components in your normal projects, which also uses other JavaScript. Your pages won't be AMP valid, but you will be making a little bit of significant impact on the overall performance of the page. This can be done by transitioning from a normal website which doesn't use AMP HTML at all, and gradually moving towards having more of the HTML component as AMP, and finally having a full-fledged website that is with AMP. Your performance is tend to improve linearly with adding more components of AMP inside your website. So this is all. This was the quick demonstration of what makes a good first impression, and also what are important core web vitals that lets you get a good impression in front of your audiences, how AMP actually helps you get these core web vitals done, and also how you can work around with them. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, to let me know. This was Aman Sharma. Thank you.